Towards the end of the year, there's a day when I always enter the dark side of the web. It's so that I can get my hands on next season's hottest items. It's a well-kept secret in the influencer community. There's a website that releases only a couple of the rarest designer clothing and handbags for only a few bucks. Because I'm not rich but still want to make a statement, for the past few years that's what I've been doing. Nothing crazy, I just want to update my wardrobe. This year, the hottest item on the website was the unreleased Spring Birkin handbag, which was going to retail for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was hanging out with my roommate while we waited for the alert to pop up on our laptops. We were just having a girls' night in, chatting and watching TV. Suddenly, I heard an alert and got excited. But instead of receiving an alert about the bag, an ad for fame popped up. A video advertisement started playing.
Do you want to go viral in just a week? We'll make you a star. Get 1 million followers, satisfaction guaranteed.
Curious, I clicked on it. I mean, I was already on the dark web. Might as well see what else was out there. And this looked pretty enticing because it said I'd only have to pay after I hit 1 million followers. I got excited and started asking Stacy if I should do it. She wasn't saying much. I asked her what was up. She said she might have found a new gig and that she was going to look into it more and head to bed soon. I was happy for her since she hasn't had many opportunities during the pandemic and was struggling to pay rent. I was preoccupied reading the details of the offer that I was a few seconds late when the bag's availability popped up on my screen. So I missed my chance at getting the new Birkin. Oh well, there's always next year, and I didn't want to miss out on the new opportunity. I decided to take a leap of faith and put in my social media handle. I then went to bed. The following day, I woke up to 2,000 more subscribers on YouTube and TikTok, and an additional 5,000 followers on Instagram. I immediately jumped out of bed. It actually worked. I was confused, but also really excited. I even checked some of the accounts that followed me, and they were all legit. Some were even verified accounts. Most of them were men, though. Excited, I ran to Stacy's room to tell her what I woke up to, then paused because she was still fast asleep. She must have been up really late looking into the new gig, because she fell asleep with her laptop on top of her. I left her alone and texted her that I had news I had to share, and that I was going to make us breakfast. At around 2 p.m., Stacy entered the living room and looked exhausted. I asked her what was wrong. She said she hardly got any sleep last night and congratulated me. I asked her if she could do me a favor and take some new photos of me to post. She said, of course. I made her a cup of coffee and she helped me pick out an outfit to wear. I was trying to think of ways to best present myself to my new followers and wanted to change up my makeup for the day. I realized that I left my new lipstick in my bathroom. Or maybe it was in my vanity. I couldn't quite remember. Stacy jumped up and said she'd get it for me. I thanked her and continued fixing my hair. It had been about 10 minutes and Stacy returned. She looked uncomfortable. Embarrassed, she said coffee and her don't mix well and handed me my lipstick. She took a few pictures of me and helped me decide on a filter. The last one was perfect. As soon as I posted a picture, I immediately had hundreds of likes. My dreams were finally coming true. For the next few days, the numbers rose even more. I even received a few inquiries about being sponsored and collaborations with different brands. I never heard about the companies though, and most of them were for lingerie and adult toys, which confused me even more. By the third day, I had over 100,000 more subscribers and followers on all of my channels. And that's when I received a DM that made me feel really uncomfortable and regret everything. Hey, you should wear that white slip to bed more often. It really makes you look like an angel when you sleep. But hey, wearing nothing is also cool. Winky face. Just a suggestion. New fan here. Huh? How do you know what I wear to sleep? LOL, what? That's what you showed us last night. What the hell are you talking about? Showed who? Then he blocked me. I immediately told Stacy about the weird DM and told her something was off. I felt like I was being watched. She said not to worry, and that she was going to keep an eye on me. She poured me a glass of wine and told me I should try to relax and take a warm bath. She then got up and handed me a bottle of bath bubbles. She was right. I mean, I'm bound to get the occasional creepy message, right? I should be celebrating and excited about the new opportunities. I got up and went to my bathroom. I always look forward to the holidays. This year was going to be extra special because my brother and I were going to bring home our new dates. I was really excited to introduce my family to Tom. I was hyping up all my family's special dishes that have been perfected over the years. As we approached my childhood home in the Poconos, I warned him that my father might persuade him into joining the guys for their annual hunt in the backwoods of our house. My father was a world champion hunter, having won numerous awards and competitions. I told him not to freak out, and that it would be a great way for them to break the ice and bond. My father was looking forward to meeting my new boyfriend. When we arrived, we made ourselves at home and everyone got acquainted with the new guests of honor. I was surprised that my brother was able to find himself a pretty and sweet girlfriend, being the tough Marine that he was. Wow, what a fine young man and woman. You both sure know how to pick them. After a couple of hours of chatting in the living room, my brother and dad decided to head out for their annual hunt, and invited Tom. If we're lucky, we might be able to catch something bigger this year. They left and I stayed behind with my mom and Kay, chatting and starting dinner. Everything was perfect. I couldn't wait for the feast. We were about to throw the pies into the oven when suddenly... Ooh, sounds like they caught something. What is happening? Oh, Gerald must have... That sounded like Tom. You two stay here. I'm going to see what's going on. When I approached the woods, I saw Tom on the ground, unconscious, and my father with a bullet through his left shoulder. My brother was crying and angry. They told me that after shooting a deer, my brother stepped away to take a piss. Out of nowhere, Tom pointed his gun at my father and told him that he was a horrible human being and had to pay for what he had done to all the animals he hunted over the years. Luckily, my brother got back in time, but had no other choice but to shoot Tom. I ran back to the house to grab the emergency kit and call the sheriff. When I entered, my mom was tied up to a chair and Kay was holding a knife. "Where's Tom?" She told me that she had to kill my mother and then me. How would you feel if I came into your home, killed your family, and ate their meat? Well, now you'll know. My brother appeared out of nowhere from behind me with his shotgun. He aimed it at Kay and told her to put the knife down. After I left, my brother went through Tom's pockets to try to find his ID or phone. He found a wedding photo of Kay and him in his wallet. It turns out that Tom and Kay were a couple. They made it their life's mission to hunt down hunters and kill them. The police came to the house, and Kay and my brother were arrested. Tom didn't make it, and fortunately, my brother was released from jail shortly after. My father was brought to the hospital and had to undergo immediate surgery. However, the doctors advised him not to hunt anymore, because the recoil will hurt his shoulder. And Kay has been in jail ever since. This is a story from when my mother was a young girl in Germany. On this particular December, the ground was covered with snow, and the sound of carols filled the air. The villagers of Ramsau, a small German village, were preparing for the upcoming holidays. Some of the villagers were full of joy, awaiting the presents and delicious dishes they were going to prepare, while some people were full of fear. Many years have passed since the incident on the 5th of December. When my mom was a little girl, her parents always talked about Saint Nicholas and his counterpart, Krampus. In her village, there was a girl named Frida. She was a blonde girl with eyes as blue as the sky and a lovable personality. All the children, including Frida, were told from a very young age to respect the traditions and to behave well. Frida didn't believe in Santa Claus or Krampus. What she did believe in was doing whatever she wanted to do whenever she wanted to do so. It wasn't a secret that Frida was a reckless child. She stole candies and beat the other kids in her class. And unfortunately, she didn't foresee the events that were about to follow when the Krampusnacht came upon Ramsau in the year 1968. For her, it was just another successful day of bullying her peers. She ate her dinner and quickly went to bed. Frida couldn't fall asleep for some reason, so she stayed up late. The clock hit midnight. The lights in her room went off. Frida could hear the sound of a distant chain clanking, accompanied by bells. Her window suddenly broke open, and with it, a massive shadow slipped into her room. In the darkness, she could make out the figure of a person with horns on its head. Frida quickly realized that it wasn't her father playing tricks on her. It was Krampus. The goat-man abomination charged at her full speed and grabbed her. Her screams slowly muffled away when put inside Krampus's sack. Frida's dad rushed into her room with his hunting rifle. He stood paralyzed as the devil before him struck him with his whip and sent him down to the ground. While laughing, Krampus's wicked laugh woke up the neighbors, but Frida's screams woke up the entire village. A hunting party was quickly gathered. Together with their hunting dogs, they tracked down the evil beast into a cave unknown to most of Ramsau. There they saw a gruesome image. Skeletons were scattered along the path to the main chamber of the cave where Krampus dwelled. There they saw Frida. She was locked inside of a cage. In front of her was a boiling cauldron. The group of men ran in and attempted to save her, but alas, the lock was unbreakable. It didn't take long for Krampus to appear and wreak havoc. Frida's father begged Krampus to release his daughter, but the creature didn't listen. The group ran away in terror, leaving him and Frida alone with the devil's pawn. The flames under the giant pot started burning with mighty power. The cauldron started lifting off the ground. Her father screamed and said to take him instead. Then the devil himself appeared, agreeing with the terms that Frida's father was giving. She was freed for the price of her dad's soul. The last seconds of her father's life were of him smiling at his daughter while inside of the cage. Then, with the snap of Krampus's finger, Frida fell down, unconscious. The next day, Frida woke up in her bed. The window wasn't broken. She went downstairs to find her mother making breakfast. When Frida asked her mother where her father was, she turned around in confusion and said that she never had a father. Her mother's words weren't taken seriously for the next 8 years, but gradually she forgot about his existence and tried to be good. Her life went on without anything as dramatic as her encounter with Krampus. That was until she gave birth to her daughter, Ida. Ida grew up to be just like her mother, and just like any other child, she was mischievous from time to time. The holiday traditions grew old, with nobody to follow them. Children were disappearing, but no one believed in the legend of Krampus. They opted to believe that when a kid vanished from thin air, they were taken by wild animals. No one but Frida and a few other people, whose parents gave up their lives in order for them to be free, believed. Only those people kept their children at bay when the 5th of December came around. One year, Frida and Ida were enjoying their evening in front of the TV. The time was well beyond 12 o'clock. After being sure for another year that Krampus wouldn't take her child away, she took Ida to bed and then got ready herself. Frida's husband was off on a business trip in Hamburg, leaving the whole bed to herself. Suddenly, she could hear a weird sound inside of her head, almost like the sound of chains, which then transformed into a loud thud. Then another one, and another one. When she heard a scream, she finally opened her eyes. Frida rushed to her daughter's bedroom, only to find her fast asleep. The doorbell rang. Frida cautiously grabbed a knife from the kitchen and went to the door. She looked through the peephole. Nothing. She then cracked open the door. On the welcome mat, there was a steaming piece of coal. It had a ribbon tied around it. She picked it up and stared at it in confusion. Then the memory struck her. Frida threw the coal to the ground and sprinted upstairs. To her misfortune, she was late. The bed was empty. Mutter, was ist los? She turned around. Ida was at the door, holding a glass of water. Frida sighed in relief, but it was at that little moment she'd regret for the rest of her life. As Ida was approaching her crying mother, a pair of long and muscled arms with large claws grabbed her from behind. Ida screamed and her glass of water fell to the ground. Frida looked up and saw him, with a huge grin on his face, stuffing Ida into his sack. Krampus. Frida screamed at Krampus while lunging the large kitchen knife into him, but it didn't affect him at all. He looked down at her and smiled with his bloody teeth. Krampus pulled out a note from the sack on his back and placed it in her hands. I will take everything from you. Only death can save you from the sleepless nights and the loss of the ones you love. Crying, Frida fell to her knees and begged Krampus to spare her daughter's life and to take her instead. He looked at her and smiled even bigger while saying,
Vida Vater, so die Tochter, deine Schulden werden jetzt bezahlt.
He released Ida in exchange for her mother. Ida looked at her while tears rolled down her face. Frida simply smiled before being put inside Krampus's sack. Ida ran to Krampus, but before she could grab her mother, Krampus laughed, and with the snap of his finger, Ida fell down, unconscious. My mother would tell me this story every December, but this year she looked at me as tears rolled down her face and revealed my family secret. Vergiss deine Oma Frida nicht, meine Tochter. Sei ein gutes Mädchen. Krampus is real. This happened back when I was about 14 years old. My brother had to help raise money for his school's musical and had to sell a box full of chocolate bars. Because he likes to leave things last minute and was getting desperate, my parents made me accompany him. I really didn't want to, but luckily, my best friend Kathy tagged along. We left Friday after school, and Kathy helped me plan out the perfect route. We decided to focus on the bougie area of our town, full of folks who came from old money. We visited the big houses with Christmas decorations and lights on, and were amazed by all the adults who actually answered their doors. They even bought multiple bars of chocolate. They were especially interested in hearing about the musical and asked Brian if he could sing a Christmas carol for them. Some of the adults were feeling extra generous. They handed him extra cash and offered us tasty holiday treats. Kathy and I were getting into the holiday spirit after seeing all the decorations and kindness, so we stopped here and there to take selfies with the decorated houses as our background.
You guys are walking too slow.
My brother was walking ahead of us, eager to sell the rest of the chocolates and get more tips. And because he was being really hard-headed and didn't want to slow down, we decided to mess with him.
Shh, crouch down so he doesn't see us.
So while he was a house ahead of us, we hid behind a tree and waited for him to realize we were gone and start crying. We knew he'd be safe, and we were still able to keep an eye on him from where we hid. But after a few minutes, I poked my head out because he hadn't noticed us gone. I saw him standing in front of a house with all its lights off.
What the heck is that fart face doing now?
Confused, I walked towards him.
Brian, come back here now.
I got closer to the house, and he ignored me. I approached the front porch and saw Brian with a dazed look on his face. An old woman was extending her hand out towards him, and he grabbed it. I was screaming at him to stop what he was doing and that we had to head back home ASAP. In a split second, he stepped through the threshold and entered the house.
Brian, stop!
I ran up the steps while the door was closing and blocked it with my foot. At that moment, I got a glimpse of an odd-looking woman. She was in her 50s, had dark black disheveled hair and light green eyes that looked otherworldly. She immediately locked eyes with me, and I had to blink twice so that I wouldn't get mesmerized. I was telling her to leave my brother alone and called her all kinds of names, but she just stared at me in silence. I was starting to panic, but knew I had to protect my brother. So I pushed her aside to grab and pull him away, but she also grabbed him too, and she tugged. He screamed in pain. I put my fears aside, took out my phone and snapped a picture of the crazy-looking woman for evidence. I told her that I was going to report her for being a sad, creepy woman who preys on little children during the holidays. The flash startled her, so she let go of Brian and pushed him out the door. I tried to catch him. She looked at me once more, then closed and locked the door. Brian fell to the ground and snapped out of his trance. I stood there in shock, because when I took the picture, the flash revealed something entirely different. She looked like a witch or a demon with beams of light coming out of her eyes. Kathy ran over and pulled Brian and me away from the house. She said she recorded the whole thing. I looked down at Brian, and he looked like he was going to faint.
What happened? I couldn't control my body. I tried to fight back, but it just hurt a lot. I'm sorry. I didn't want to go there.
Relieved, I hugged him, and we all ran back home. Kathy went back to her place. As soon as I entered the house, I told my parents what happened, and they called the cops, who then went straight to the odd woman's home. We anxiously waited for any news from the cops, and I hugged Brian and told him that everything would be all right. His arm was starting to bruise, so I iced it for him. The police went to our house afterwards and looked a bit annoyed. They said they had to storm into the house because no one answered the door. They asked us to describe the woman and to repeat the address again. I explained everything again, and the police looked at me in disbelief. I grabbed my phone to show them the picture of the woman. But when we looked at the photo, it was completely blank. The cops thought I was lying and were about to leave. Apparently, they broke into the house and found out that nobody has lived there in over a decade. We were all speechless. I knew that I took a picture of the woman. Why was it now blank? Then I remembered that Kathy filmed the whole thing on her phone. We called Kathy's parents and asked if they could bring her phone over. When they got to our place, Kathy pulled out her phone, and again, the footage didn't show the woman. However, it showed me grabbing Brian's arm and pulling him away from the house. We were all so confused, and Brian was crying now. My parents were embarrassed and apologized to the police as they left. Our parents sat us down and asked us what really happened, but they didn't believe us. Brian couldn't remember anything and continued crying. They accused me of hurting Brian because I wasn't interested in accompanying him and probably wanted him to hurry up. I got angry and ran to my room. I couldn't believe that I was being blamed now. My parents grounded me for a month, and Kathy wasn't allowed to hang out with me over the Christmas break. Brian remained silent. Even I was starting to doubt myself and thought that maybe I was going crazy and made this woman up. But I would never hurt my little brother. I went back to the creepy woman's house every day after school, and the place was always deserted. Exhausted, I apologized to my parents. Once I got my phone and laptop back, I started doing some research. I looked up the address, and apparently, the house has been abandoned ever since the owner disappeared after being found guilty of child abduction. I even found a photo of the owner of the house. And of course, it was the creepy woman from the night of the incident. But of course, when I brought it up again to my parents, they didn't believe me. Brian doesn't remember the woman due to being in a trance, and Kathy didn't get a clear glimpse of her from where she hid. I feel like I'm going insane now, and still go to the house after school. I won't give up until I come face to face with that woman again. In the winter of 2010, I was going through a rough time. My husband and I separated in the summer, and it was my first Christmas without him in over a decade. We were high school sweethearts who grew up in a small town. We married young and had our daughter when we were 20. We had a lot of growing up to do, and he decided that he wanted to see what else was out there and focus on himself, which devastated me. My daughter, Annie, has always been a very sweet and well-behaved girl. She's a true blessing and the light of my life. She was surprisingly handling the separation well. Annie and I were staying at the house I inherited from my grandma, which was in a rural town in upstate New York. Annie was mostly excited about celebrating 2 Christmases that year and doubling her presents. During that time, I had to start working a 9-to-5 job and really wanted to be more financially secure for my daughter. Money was very tight, but I knew I could pull through and surprise her with something big that year. I asked her what she wanted for Christmas, and she looked down. She said she wanted our family back together. I told her that her dad and I were going through a rough patch and needed time apart. Then she slowly looked up at me and said she really wanted a puppy for Christmas, and I considered it, since it would provide emotional support to the both of us and brighten up our lives a bit. As a treat, I'd take her to the adoption center to see if there were any puppies. We'd also spend evenings browsing the internet to see if there were any near us. Her eyes always sparkled when we found a dog that she liked. The larger breed seemed to be her favorite. Annie was around 4 years old and still getting used to sleeping in her bed by herself. I think that was one of the toughest parts about the separation for her, was not having both her mom and dad kiss her goodnight. She also didn't like sleeping in her big girl bed and would come to my bed in the middle of the night if she had a bad dream. I didn't mind. It was nice to not have to sleep alone. One night, I put her to bed and kissed her goodnight. Before I left, I saw that she had a frown on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and she said that Christmas wouldn't be the same that year. I hugged her and said that it might not be, but that I'd do anything in my power to make it an unforgettable Christmas, and put a smile back on her face. As soon as I left her room, I felt devastated. I really did want to give her the best Christmas possible and hoped that I wasn't failing as a mother. I headed to bed and decided that I would get her a puppy this weekend while she was at her dad's place. After my glass of wine and browsing the adoption center's website, I passed out. And as expected, in the middle of the night, Annie came to my room and hopped into bed with me. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Maybe I dreamt that she came to my bed last night. Annie ran to my room and started jumping on my bed. She was in a very cheerful mood. Confused, I asked her what was up. She said that she loved her Christmas present. Huh? I asked her what she was talking about. She said that she knew she was getting a dog and that I could give her her new friend now. Annie had an overactive imagination, so maybe she dreamt this. I told her okay and confirmed that she was getting a dog. She hugged me while telling me that I was the best mom in the world, and said that I could stop hiding her present now. Honey, you'll have to be a little more patient. I didn't even find a furry friend for her yet. That day, I found a dog at one of the websites I was browsing. I was planning on meeting the little guy after work the next day. During dinner, Annie was beaming with excitement as she started coming up with potential names for the dog.
I like Boo. Or maybe Buster.
And after dinner, she was organizing her room when I came in to get her ready for bed. She said the dog's bed will be right next to hers, that he'll have his own space when he comes home. She looked at me and said that she can now sleep in her room because her dog will guard her and that she won't bother me in the middle of the night anymore. We said our goodnights and I headed to bed. And again, I woke up in the middle of the night because Annie couldn't sleep. After she opened my door, I waited for her to snuggle up next to me. Annie, we have to get up early in the morning. You have to be at your dad's place by 10. Hurry up and get in bed. Annie. Then I felt something wet on my foot. I pulled my comforter off my face. Then I saw it at the foot of my bed. It was a creature unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was licking my feet with its abnormally long tongue. I screamed. Then it screeched. It crawled towards me and just stared at me. I yelled at it to leave and grabbed the closest thing to me, which was a lamp. I smacked it, and it screamed again with its shrill voice while howling. Annie ran in and told me to stop, that I was hurting her friend. I pulled her away from the creature, and she started crying. It looked at us one last time, then jumped through my window. Annie cried more, saying that that was her dog and that I hurt him. I was very confused and scared shitless. I asked her questions. Apparently, the creature had visited her in her room the past 3 nights. I tried to explain to her that that creature wasn't a dog, that I didn't know what the heck it was, but it wasn't safe. And that made her cry even more.
First Dad left, and now Boo left.
Well, I guess that was the name she decided on. She ran to her room and locked the door. She didn't want to talk to me. I tried to tell her that I was going to meet an actual dog for her tomorrow when she was at her dad's, but she didn't care anymore. Okay, honey, get some sleep. We'll talk about this tomorrow. I was still terrified and couldn't sleep that night. Annie was still giving me the silent treatment when I drove her to her dad's place in the morning. Before getting out of the car, she said,
Don't bother looking for a dog. I don't want one anymore. You'll just hate that one too.
She slammed the car door and ran into his house. My husband asked me what happened, but of course he didn't believe me and told me that I really needed to stop drinking. I rolled my eyes and argued with him. I only have a glass of wine before bed now, and I'm working full-time to be the best mom for Annie. I went back home and had a mini breakdown. I was also scared of being by myself in the house, so before going to bed, I made sure all the lights were on, that all the doors and windows were locked, and that I had a few weapons close to me. It was snowing heavily outside. I couldn't sleep that night. thinking about that creature going near my daughter. Then I heard screeches coming from the distance. I grabbed the kitchen knife and listened closely. Then all the lights went off. I tried to turn on the lamp next to my bed with no luck. I got up and tried to turn on the lights. Nothing. The hallway lights also didn't work. Shit, it was a blackout. How convenient. The storm must have caused a power outage. I wanted to check if my next-door neighbors were also affected. I was terrified while trying to find the front door of my house. Luckily, I found it and only managed to trip over something once. As soon as I closed the door and turned around, I saw it again, there, staring at me. I froze for a few seconds, debating whether I should run back inside the house or drive away in my car. I looked into its eyes and felt terror in every fiber of my being. I had no idea what it wanted from me. I slowly walked backwards to my car while it opened its mouth and let out a screech. The adrenaline rush kicked in and I got in my car, but before closing the door, it scratched my arm. I managed to drive off just in time. I went straight to my husband's place because he was the closest family I had, and I really needed to be with my daughter. He opened his door and immediately saw my bloody wound. I told him what happened while shaking. He disinfected and bandaged up my arm. And he told me that I should stay with him while I tried to figure out what to do with my house. I wasn't safe there anymore. Annie walked in and saw her dad bandaging up my wound. She ran over and hugged me. She was happy that the three of us were together. While we were embracing, she smiled and quietly said,
Even though you scared Boo away, Boo still granted my Christmas wish. So, I'm going to wish for this every year, forever and ever.